Good morning. We're at the rapidly approaching the end of June of 2015, and as you can see in the Chardonnay that we got pretty close to bunch closure, which means the bunches have filled in on these Dijon clones of Chardonnay. The berries are starting to size up pretty well. The Yountville area here has been in a very high mildew pressure year versus other parts of the county. And I've been very vigilant on getting good sprays in and rotating our fungicides. But what the crew's doing here is they're opening up the canopy, they're leafing, removing a lot of leaves around the clusters so that our next spray that'll come in should be able to penetrate within those clusters and get a good coating of material inside the closed clusters. If we have leaves that are, or a canopy that's really congested and that can't see, the spray is not going to be as an effective tool. Generally with these split canopies, it's also essential to pull leaves on the interior portion and also to make sure that the canopy is separated to get ample sunlight, dappled sunlight, but ample sunlight in and around the fruit as well as the spray. So you can see we have a separation here of about 16-18 inches of the quad cordons. And the crew is also, when they make the pass back, will be coming down and making sure there's not too much leaves and laterals inside, again blocking the sunlight and the air movement. One thing about the Dijon clones of Chardonnay, they're much smaller clusters and they're pretty well spaced. They're not touching each other, creating further problems for rot or unusual ripening process. We're in the same vineyard, and this is the variety Merlot, and you can see how much larger the leaves are than the Chardonnay is in comparison, and how it really shields the fruit zone. The nice thing about the Merlot is longer, straggly clusters, not as prone to botrytis bunch rot unless we have a lot of rain and the clusters are very tight, but a lot more loose in comparison to the Chardonnay that we were just at. But still, the same criteria is going to pertain to pulling off a lot of interior leaves, especially laterals being the short shoots that come and rise above the clusters, and exposing this fruit as much as possible for good ripening. So this is an operation that's very important, especially getting good color into the red varieties, but not overexposing the fruit. But at the same time, we want to make sure our spray is getting into these clusters as they start to tighten up and we don't have any mildew in here. Depends on who you talk to. This is either a wing or a shoulder off the main cluster, and a lot of times they'll get snipped off too, just to allow that main body of fruit to be there. Again, this is a way to get into the interior. Yes, I have a machine to do the exterior of leafing, but it doesn't, it just helps get about 50% of the leaves off, and we'll still send a hand crew in after to do a little bit more leafing as necessary. This selection of Merlot is a much larger cluster, and it still has a little bit more sizing to do in lengthwise and as in berry sizing. These could weigh as much as 1/3 of a pound. So again, having much larger clusters than the Chardonnay that's in the same vineyard, we have to still provide good airflow, good sunlight onto the berries and expose them to the elements such as wind to reduce the humidity. And a part of that operation too is going to be taking off these wings and shoulders and making sure the clusters are not really touching each other. So we pull about 3 or 4 leaves and laterals above the last cluster to again to facilitate this dappled sunlight onto the fruit. Still has plenty of shade on the top for extremely hot days, so we don't suffer the sunburn effects. And one thing that we notice in vineyards that get sunburn is because they're not adequately pre-watered, and the vines are going to suffer that moisture. To keep the vine going is going to come from somewhere, and it usually comes from the fruit at that point when the roots can't pull it up fast enough. So again, if we know there's going to be some heat extremes, we're going to pre-water and try to keep the vines as turgid as possible without overwatering. One of the important criteria in determining how many leaves to remove and laterals is also row orientation, as well as where the afternoon, the hottest sun is going to be. A lot of growers and then ourselves will generally pull most of the leaves on the morning side because it's a cooler sun, with, again, in this trellis system, the interiors, and then slightly a little bit less on the western panel, so that way we risk minimal sunburn to direct exposure. So again, it's kind of knowing your trellis system, knowing the row direction, where that afternoon sun is going to head, especially as we get into August and September. As you know, the sun shifts positions during the year, and so again, it's just knowing what is the best for the vines without overexposure. It's approximately 8:30 in the morning. Again, you can see the effects of the canopy that's been slightly trimmed and how much shadowing is going on as the sun is starting to rise from the eastern sky. And these are 10-foot rows, and that shadow is approximately 6.5 to 7 feet long. So again, as the sun crosses over the canopy, we're going to have the same effect in the afternoon. So we get pretty good shadowing from the adjacent row vines, but not too much, because if we allow the trellis to overgrow, then we get this folding over the canopy, and we do not want that as well. We only need about 15, 18 leaves on a shoot that has 2 clusters to adequately mature it. So if we have shoots that are much longer than that, runner shoots, we're just into vegetative mode. So again, balancing the vine, the growth, the crop, the quantity of leaves it takes to mature that crop is very important dynamics. And a vine that's got too much crop and not enough canopy, thusly will not mature that fruit properly. Vice versa, if the canopy is so vigorous and there's a lot less fruit and it's a very vegetative type of vine, it will be expressed into the grapes, into the maturity process as a vegetative character, because the vines are in the vegetative growth and not letting the clusters actually be the sink and pulling the ripeness out of the leaves as it's maturing. We are probably 3 weeks ahead of normal, maybe even 4 weeks. We normally don't even see bunch closure till mid to late July in a typical year. I have a great feeling this is part of our drought effects, if you will, where the growing season has been advanced again. Last year it was advanced by a couple, 3 weeks, and now this year we're seeing the same thing happening, but even quicker pace than even in 2014. And that's not just us, it's all growers alike in the North Coast. We're seeing that what we're going to be expecting a very early harvest this year. I don't have predictions. I could say last year we started on September 12th with Sauvignon Blanc, and I have a feeling we'll be picking that same block of Sauvignon Blanc late August, mid-August this year.